There's one thing that's called fromage de tête. It's cheese of the head. And they'll take like a cow head or something and boil it, and all the oils and fats and hairs float to the top. And then they take it and cool it so it's cold, and then they'll chop it up into little cubes and you eat it. I don't like it plain, but it wasn't bad on a sandwich. So on a piece of bread with some lasari, which is carrots and vinegar. They do like to eat chicken feet. You got to get used to the texture, but the flavor is really nice. And then I had they often boil chicken heads and eat those, and they'll just cut the head off, feathers and all. Don't waste time plucking anything. Boil it, and then they'll set it out on a plate. And not a big fan of the chicken head, but I did try it. Wasn't able to eat it in one whole bite, so I had to chomp through the skull and eat half of it at a time. But it wasn't bad. I tried it once, and now I don't have to ever try it again. I mean, they eat every part of the animal. There's definitely a big difference in do's and don'ts in Madagascar than here. There's things that they do there that aren't offensive that would be offensive here, and vice versa. One of the biggest examples that I can think of is they're a little bit more blunt down there with physical features, which here, sometimes we tend to tiptoe around. If you're big, down there they'll let you know, wow, you're big. And here, if you say that, that's kind of rude, but down there it's more of a compliment. It's like, wow, you can say mananaina, you have life. Wow, you have life. It's like, you're matavi be, you're fat. So it's funny because here it's like, what? Like, wow. You get there, wow, you're really white. It's like, yes, thank you, I am, thank you. And to them, like, it's not rude. It's not being rude in their culture. It's just, hey, cool. So that's something that you have to kind of get used to when you get there. And you just have to kind of get it in your mind, like, oh, they're not being rude. They're being friendly. They're being talkative. It's something that they like to talk about. So if you just kind of be open with it and just kind of laugh, and if they say something that offends you, you just kind of laugh it off, shrug it off, be like, yeah, they're really friendly and they're really easy to talk to, and you can talk to them about pretty much anything, and they just don't get offended with physical stuff like that, because they're just like, that's how it is. It is how it is. They really respect people's property, and like for example, we have our backpacks, and we'll set our backpacks down on the floor in front of us as we sit down. A Malagasy person will never step over your backpack because that's your personal property, and they're respecting that. So they'll ask you to move your backpack. When up here, you'll just step over it and not think about it. But they're like, hey, can you move your backpack? And you're like, and then they walk through. So just something like that just you don't really think about, but to them it's a big deal. One thing that's really cool, they really respect people. They rarely get in fights with other people. They rarely hurt other people. They're really peaceful, really non-violent, and it's because it's really, really bad to hurt someone. I mean, that kind of goes for any culture, but I thought it was amazing that down there, I never really saw any fights, never really saw a whole lot of violence, and you don't really hear about it a lot. I mean, obviously there's exceptions, but it's peaceful. No, I've never heard of a missionary getting mugged. Pickpocket's a different story. That can happen anywhere. So you got to be careful when you're in crowded places. Watch your pockets, watch your backpack. They think it's incredibly awesome that someone so far away has come to this country, to their country, learned their language and studied them and tried to understand them. They they think it's incredible. They're like, this is awesome. They're kind of in a faraway place, and it's hard to get to, and I think they feel like sometimes they get forgotten. They're just, no one ever learns Malagasy. But then there's this group that comes, and they just learn to love the people, and they learn to love the language, and they just absorb the culture, and the Malagasys are just like, this is awesome. Like, we have friends. We got in right during the rainy season. It's completely different. The climate, the culture of the people, like how people think, it's just the complete reverse of anything. And I've traveled a bunch since then, and Madagascar is still the coolest place I've ever been. And it's still the most different place I've ever been. There's a lot of misconceptions about Madagascar. So when I tell people, they're kind of shocked at how different Madagascar is from what they perceive it is. One, Madagascar is not a small island. It's a very large island. It's twice the size of Arizona, or twice the size of Utah, a little bit bigger. So it's a big island. There are people on the island, and there's a lot. There's over 20 million people on the island. Madagascar has a lot of tropical regions, but it's also half desert. So there is a lot of dry places in Madagascar. There's a lot of cool wilderness places, and that's people, they'll watch documentaries of the cartoons, and they see the wilderness, and there's a lot of wilderness, and it's super pretty. There's the spiny forests and spiny deserts, and there's the stone forests. I guess I call it the tsingy. So there's a lot of really cool places, but there's also really, really big cities, massive cities. Tana has, depending on how you look at it or how you measure it, there's between 2.5 to 7.5 million people. It's a busy, crowded, bustling city. Lots of people. And bump elbows a lot because there's so many people. Madagascar is the #1 rice consumer per capita in the world. So, and I heard it, and then I went and looked it up. So at least last time I looked it up, #1 rice consumer per capita. So they beat China and they beat India. You eat a lot of rice there. A lot. 3 meals a day. Big pile of rice. Oh, another misconception. There are no rhinos, elephants, lions, giraffes, hippos. They're only in some parts of Africa, and they're not in Madagascar. Madagascar has obviously a lot of lemurs. There are a lot of parks around, just kind of like nature reserves, and they feel wild, and you can go out there and see lemurs and even play with them. The park guide gave us some bananas and some crackers, and the lemurs were super friendly, and we were able to break off pieces of banana and feed them. And there's tricks. They're a little bit shy, but there's tricks to get them to jump on your shoulder. And we'd lean up against a tree and hold a banana out here, and the lemur would jump on our heads or jump out to our arms and reach out and grab the banana. So it's definitely, lemurs are my favorite animal. They're so adorable. They're so nice. Madagascar is known for its chameleons, and there's tons of chameleons. And those you'll find in the cities even. You'll see them everywhere. And at first, it's funny, at first they're kind of shy and timid around you, and they'll try and avoid you. But after they kind of get used to you, you can hold them and play with them, and as long as you watch for the signs, the warning signs, if they puff up their neck, if you watch for those signs, you'll know when they're going to bite you, and you know not to stick your hand in their face. If you want to see a chameleon, you can find little kids and hire them to go out and find chameleons for you. One time we went out and said, we'll give you 100 ariary, which is 5 cents, per chameleon that you found. And we said it to a group of kids. And they're like, okay. And they ran out and they came back with 10 chameleons. So I have a picture of me with with all these chameleons on my shoulders and arms, and I'm just like, but they're fun. They're a cool creature. There's some cool trees. There's some cool cacti. You might see a fusa, not in the wild though. Fusa's the predator of the lemurs. It's a cat. You'll have a big bowl of rice, and then there's a loke, and the loke is the word for like toppings, what you put on that rice. And there's a bunch of different types of loke. There's beans is super common. There's fwanzuburi, which is these really big peanut tasting beans, and they're super delicious. That's my favorite loke. Then there's ravitutu, which is crushed leaves, boiled. Then there's anana, which is stuff, translates to stuff, which is just green stuff. That's actually one of my favorites. And then often they'll eat it with beef, maybe a little bit of chunks of meat, not just meat. They'll have a lot of fat mixed in too. That's like the everyday food. That's what everybody eats pretty much every meal. Just rice with some kind of loke on top. Then there's the fun food, which is the street food. Madagascar has awesome street food. They have nems, sambos. Nems are kind of like egg rolls, a little bit similar to egg rolls. They're just deep fried rolls with whatever kind of vegetable or jed inside. Then there's sambos, which I think came from India because I've seen them in like India restaurants and stuff. But it's just kind of the same thing, but it's a triangle. Then there's mesquite, which is like a kebab, just like little pieces of meat. And they grill it right there in front of you. You tell them you want however many you want, 10, 20. And they're like 2.5, 5 cents a piece. So you'll go buy 10 and spend 50 cents and just eat a bunch of meat. Mufa Kunju, which is bread, battered banana. Bananas dipped in like a cake batter, kind of, or like a bread batter, and then deep fried. So it's like this gooey, mushy banana. Super delicious. You gotta be careful. Only eat it when it's hot, and don't eat too much, or your stomach is not gonna forgive you. Zazan man namna betsaka ny Madagascar. Betsaka ny namako. Mahafinaritra be ny namako. Misy namako membre, misy namako tsy membre. Ary mahafinaritra be izy rehetra. Tena tiako izy ireo. Tsy dia fomba fiteny any Madagascar ny tiako izy ireo. Fa te Amerika. Tiako be ianareo any Madagascar.